Hi, this is Dr. Kate from HypnoTC, the Hypnotherapy Training Company. Today's video is going to be about the 3 C's. What are they? Compliance, contraindications, and consent. So let's start with compliance. Compliance is all about getting somebody to do what you ask them to do. Why is it important? Is it actually important? Well, if somebody isn't following along with your suggestions, it could be that they don't understand what you're asking of them, or it could be resistance. So a great way of finding out is to actually ask them to do something. So, for example, if somebody comes in and you're going to do a consultation with them, if you ask them to sit comfortably in the chair and they carry on sitting there looking tense, they're not really following on from what you're asking them to do. Say you start a suggestibility test and you ask them to bring their hands together and interlock their fingers and bring their index fingers up. Well, if all they do is they do this, they're not really following along. They're not complying with your suggestions. An even more simple one, as you start an induction, perhaps you could ask them to put their feet flat on the floor and to sit back in the chair. If they don't do that, they're not complying with those suggestions. And if they don't comply with those very simple suggestions, what else may they not comply with? So compliance is really useful. It's an indicator of how well somebody is or isn't engaging with what you're asking them to do. So let's move on to contraindications. Contraindications against what's indicated. We tend to have several different types or categories of contraindications. The first one, the absolutes, the things that you really will not work with. Now, some could say that contraindications also depend on your level of skill. If you haven't got training in something, then you're not going to work with it. But generally, from a hypnotherapy perspective, it's unlikely that you're going to be working with people with severe psychological disorders, unless you have extra training. So that's an example of an absolute contraindication. There's also the cautionary contraindications. What's an example? Say you have a client come to you and they have asthma. Now, you can work absolutely with people with asthma. In fact, hypnotherapy can be very helpful. However, what you're going to do is you're going to ensure that they have their appropriate reliever inhaler with them if that's something they normally carry. For another example, if somebody has an allergy, then you're not going to be using that example in your hypnotherapy work. So if they're allergic to mown grass, avoid taking them to a country park that's just been mown. The final one in contraindications is method specific. Now, a really useful induction is the eye roll induction, where you get somebody to look up and then look up even further. Yet this isn't suitable if somebody's recently had eye surgery, or even if they're wearing contact lenses. It would be quite uncomfortable for many people. In addition, if they have a physical condition such as a past dislocated shoulder, or maybe some rheumatism, some arthritis, then avoid doing anything such as an arm tug, or maybe a hand lock if they've got finger arthritis. Do think about what you're asking them to do, or what could happen physically, and how that may impact on any conditions or injuries. What was our third one? Our third one was consent. It's a really good idea, and in fact it builds rapport if you seek consent before you do hypnosis. Simply saying, "Are you ready to go into hypnosis?" gets you this consent verbally. However, there are other types of consent. Now, there's implied consent. If you go to shake somebody's hand and they make contact with you, then they've consented to touch because they've shaken hands with you. In the same way, if with somebody's eyes open, you go to lift up their wrist and they allow you to do that, there's implied consent to that touch. some parts of hypnotherapy you're going to want to have explicit consent. For example, if you're working on anything where there may be ongoing processing, it's good to have a chat with the client and check that it's the right time for them to be undergoing that work. So, to wrap things up, we've looked at 3 different things. We've looked at compliance and how somebody engages or doesn't engage with you. We've looked at contraindications and the types of areas where you can check and see whether hypnotherapy is appropriate or whether you need to take precautions or make adaptations. And then finally, there's consent, checking that somebody is happy and able to engage with you in the way that you both agree is appropriate. If you'd like to find out more about any of these topics and so much more, feel free to check out our Hypnotherapy Diploma course on hypnotc.com. Thank you for watching.